Is Coffee Prince a queer drama was really a revelation. He didn't actually really want to do it. Of the best of the genre. It's garish and ironically kind of made this alternate style into the mainstream. I can say this word, Hallmark. Hallmark. Today, let's talk Coffee Prince. And I'm talking about this one today because I think this is, aside from being one of my favorites just of all time, this one I think is still relevant in terms of its place in the K-drama landscape, what it did for storytelling, and even what it meant for its cast and producers. This is an oldie but goodie, and it pains me even a little to call it an oldie, but I suppose it's almost 20 years old now. It first aired in 2007, so it's 19 years old. I think when we think about Coffee Prince now, we remember it for being a really fun, swoon-worthy, quintessential K-drama rom-com, the best of the genre. It had superstar leads that had really amazing chemistry that felt really natural. It gave you that fluttering feeling because you felt like you were watching people really fall in love on screen. It had a brilliant secondary cast, amazing music, a director who introduced a new touch to this genre. It also introduced a lot of people, myself included, to this amazing up-and-coming world of indie music, and it was growing into its own at the same time that on a parallel track you had K-pop getting even bigger and louder and finding its own place in the worldwide stage. We're going to talk about casting first. I tend to lapse into the Korean pronunciations, but I'm trying to also do the Western pronunciations so we all know who we're talking about. So I think Eun-hye or Eun-hye as the lead was really a revelation. And that's not something I say lightly because she's pretty well known. She was really popular at the time, and this wasn't her first leading role. She had just come off a massive, massive hit called Gung or Princess Hours, which was this fusion royalty in modern times romance with Chu Ju-hoon, and it made them both international superstars. And she had already been popular even before that. She was an idol in the girl group Baby Box. They debuted in 1999, if you can believe it, if that doesn't make you feel very old. So she was already well known and she was already very popular, but what she did in Coffee Prince really solidified her position as a top leading actress, but not somebody who is just kind of in the idol slash trendy rom-com space, but also maybe even a serious actor with dramatic chops. Gong Yoo, on the other hand, had the really opposite experience coming into this, where he was a popular actor, but nowhere near what he became after Coffee Prince and where he is now. He had a couple of smaller hits. He was in the rom-com Hello Teacher, or the Korean title is Biscuit Teacher and Star Candy. This was actually a fairly popular drama, so I don't mean to say this was not a hit, but just in comparison to his later work. And I think you're going to have to just believe me when I say at the time he did not look like a 40-year-old man trying to act like a high school student. It's just maybe a testament to the fact that he looks the same at 25 as he does now in his 40s. And then She's on Duty and One Fine Day. He actually said in an interview afterward that he had been coming into this on a bit of a slump. He didn't actually really want to do it. I think he didn't want to take a rom-com, but it was sort of the business decision that his management wanted him to do a rom-com as sort of a calculated, the next step in your career. And I think he wasn't really feeling it. He says that he was questioning his future in acting. He was thinking of maybe just going off and doing his military service. And he had lost his spark for acting. And he said afterward that Coffee Prince is the project that basically got the spark back for him. The director said as well that she was really impressed when she was working with Gong Yoo because he came in with a really humble attitude, and he spoke really frankly about how he himself was the problem. And he means this in terms of like acting, as he knew his shortcomings as an actor, and that he wasn't really in a place to give any other actors acting guidance or advice. The director is also worth calling out. Her name is Lee Yoon-jung. She was notable for a couple of reasons. First of all, that she was a woman director, which was really rare at the time. I mean, is still pretty rare, but even more so back then. She had also sort of proven herself with a smaller drama special, an 8-part miniseries called Taedong National Village. And Taedong is a real place that exists where national athletes, like Olympic level athletes, they will live and train for their sport. It was a really lovely slice of life, sensitive character drama, and it actually stars some people who did become pretty famous, notably Lee Min-gi, Lee Sun-gyun, Song Ha-yoon, and Choi Yoon-jung or Choi Jung-yoon. I forget which. It didn't make a huge splash. It was sort of a hidden gem, but if you've seen this drama, it's really lovely. You can see how the progression from that to Coffee Prince really makes a lot of sense. One of her later dramas that you think you can also see this vibe in is Cheese in the Trap. Aside from the casting and the director, I think Coffee Prince, really one of the main things that it is known for, that we still remember it for, is it's really lovely, sensitive, almost unexpectedly thoughtful handling of a queer awakening, queer love story that we hadn't seen before. In K-dramas, you have seen the gender bending and cross-dressing trope a lot of times, and a lot of times it's played for either comedy or that dramatic twist. And so I think we were thinking that's what Coffee Prince is going to do. And then when you're watching it, you realize, oh, wow, they're being really respectful right now. They're giving this a lot of thought, and they're not just going for the cheap trick or the joke or the quick laugh. They're putting a lot of thought into it, and they really want to make sure that this representation feels honest. So even despite the familiar setup, okay, so the story. You have Yoon-hye playing Eun-chan, who is a girl who looks very tomboyish, often gets mistaken for being a boy. It's not something she's trying to do, it's just something that people assume because she has a very tomboyish look. So when Kong-yu's character, Han-gyul, assumes she's a boy, she decides to go with it so that she can get a job at Han-gyul's brand new coffee shop with a bit of a novel concept, which is basically being catered to by very good-looking young men dressed in their barista uniforms who will serve you. So they're only hiring young men, and so she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna go work at this cafe. And of course, in the course of this, she and Han-gyul develop feelings for each other. She's trapped in her lie, so she can't let on that she's a girl. And he is very confused about his feelings because, as far as he knows, he's not gay. So at first, it's a lot of platonic bonding. And you can see all of the coffee princes actually bonding together. It's not just the two of them, but they have a special bond and they get particularly close. And those feelings start to get a little blurry. For Han-gyul, this is a bit of a moment of crisis. What I appreciated is that they don't immediately show him like feeling disgust. He's not disgusted by his feelings. He's not disgusted by Eun-chan. He doesn't try to push Eun-chan away. He's actually more trying to understand his own self. Does it mean that he has feelings for another man? Does that mean he's gay? And the way that he goes about trying to explore those feelings is done in a very sensitive way. It's questioning and curious and not cheap. It's not done cheaply or excessively or dramatically. There are definitely moments where that feeling starts to turn confused and panicked maybe. And one thing that I think also comes through is how much he really cares for Eun-chan despite this panic that he's going through. And he tries so hard to preserve their relationship, either by overdoing like the platonic side of it. There's a really nice moment too when he asks them to be sworn brothers, because to him it's like he's actually bringing Eun-chan closer by saying, let's be sworn brothers, let's be blood brothers, let's have this really strong lifelong bond, because that way he can keep Eun-chan near without having to deal with the whole romantic question, which of course fails. I mean, this the whole point is that he's love conquers all, right? Then he goes into the space where he's really wrestling with his feelings. I think it's around episode 9 where they go to the beach and you can see the longing on his face and how badly he wants to give in to his feelings, but he's just not there yet. He's not able to accept that this is his identity. It's more than his feelings for this one person. I think he has to learn how to accept who he is first. This is also done in a very considerate and meaningful way. And then, of course, the very famous episode 10 scene, which is when I think that is maybe the most romantic speech in K-drama history, and it's delivered in such a non-speechified way. It's so raw and earnest, and I think that's why it lingers in our memory. And he goes up to Eun-chan and he's like, I don't care if you're a man or an alien, let's go with this. Let's see this through as far as it goes. And he's basically saying, I don't know where this is gonna go, but I I'm not going to fight it anymore. Wherever the end is, let's take it there. I mean, I think even in the moment, he's acknowledging this might not be a happy ending, but it's worth it. I want to see where this leads us. One key thing about this scene that really makes it work for me, aside from the obvious, is after he makes that confession, after he's arrived at this point, you see visibly on Hangyeol's face and his demeanor that he's accepted himself, he's accepted this relationship, and he's ready to go with it. And there's such a palpable sense of relief and acceptance from him. And I think that is almost more meaningful than like getting a cute kiss. Ah, I think it's still one of the most like memorable romantic drama moments. I also think that the fallout is also well treated because of course he then learns that Eun-chan has been a girl this whole time, and all of this angst and Sturm und Drang that he has been under has really been for nothing. I would argue that it's not actually for nothing, that it was very worthwhile, but he didn't have to suffer this because the question is moot. And this is why I think, okay, is Coffee Prince a queer drama? I would argue that it is, but I can also see where there is room for a bit of a gray area because I would say that Coffee Prince is the most sensitive K-drama queer romance without any queer people in it. And you can argue that Hangyeol's self-discovery journey follows all of the hallmarks of queer awakening, and he goes through all of the work to land at the conclusion that he is willing to accept himself as gay. But at the end of the day, this romance is between two cis hetero people. I like or I appreciate that the drama actually went through all of the steps so that we get to the conclusion that it would have been a queer drama had Eun-chan actually been a boy. But it's a little bit put to the side because, of course, she is then revealed. I think that it could have felt cheap at that moment, but another thing that it did well was that it played the fallout of that moment as well, so that it wasn't just like, problem solved, we're all good now. Like, none of that needed to happen. And of course, his betrayal, the sense of betrayal that he feels is appropriate because she's been lying to him this whole time. The trajectory that follows after the fallout is also something that makes that romance feel earned. It's not like it was just a deus ex machina, where some reason comes swooping in from the sky and saves them from the problem before they have to solve it themselves. And I think part of that is the director's touch. Part of that is the acting, which was really well done. I mean, first of all, you have to give props to both actors. Eun-hye really transformed herself in this drama. If you knew her before Coffee Prince, you would know that she had a very pretty feminine image. Well, at least aesthetically, because I think she was also very popular in like the variety young idol circuit for kind of having that easygoing tomboyish personality, but her looks were very feminine and she was very pretty. And she came into Coffee Prince with absolutely a complete dedication to transformation. So she cuts off all of her hair. She takes off all of the makeup. She said that through the whole filming of the drama, she only wore moisturizer. And so no makeup. And not only that, but if you notice, she had a really masculine affect around her. Like, she didn't just cut her hair and pretend to be a boy. She inhabited that body. Like, she had the mannerisms and the walk and the swagger and just kind of like that loose-limbed energy. It's like she had studied men and seen the way that they carried themselves and how it was different and really kind of lived in that space. So she was amazing. And then she got really raw in the character too. And what I really love is that the drama didn't just make her, they didn't have like that amazing makeover moment that just was like, oh, did you forget how pretty she is? Let's put a wig on her and make her look really nice. Because the first moment in the drama where she actually does try to put effort into her appearance and look girlish, it's garish. So she comes out in this like exaggeration of femininity with like the clown makeup and the really awkward posture, and it made you believe that she was truly this person, this Eun-chan character, and she wasn't putting it on. So I think that was really interesting character work that not all dramas do that. Like, some dramas, the minute that they get prettified, I feel like you see the actress kind of step back into the pretty role that she's very comfortable in. But Eun-hye really felt like she was living as Eun-chan. She even said after, I don't know if this was serious, but she said that she considered changing her stage name to Eun-chan because she loved that character so much. And then, of course, Kong-yu, we also have to look at the acting that he put in because when you look at the trajectory of his career, you can see something change in Coffee Prince where he got very in the moment. He was really feeling emotionally where Hangul was. And I think that gave Hangul this gravitas that maybe isn't on the page. I mean, all of this is to say that I think Coffee Prince on the surface could have been something that was really light and frivolous, and every component of it came together to make it feel, I wouldn't say heavy, but like there was weight to it. I've even forgotten. Okay, I'm gonna back this up. I've forgotten to introduce like how it came to be. I got distracted by things I was gonna say later. Coffee Prince was based on a book, and I have the book. This was a novel that was published the year before the drama aired, 2006. The novel was published and it did okay. It wasn't an instant bestseller or anything like that. And actually, I think it was the drama that made the sales take off. So the director Eun-hye was contracted to do the 16-episode miniseries for MBC. She was looking at adapting like a mellow romance novel to do this drama. And she found a novel by the writer Eun-hye and contacted the writer to talk it over. But I think they talked about it and were thinking, oh, actually, it doesn't really feel right because it was a period drama. It didn't really feel like it would fit the 16-episode format. So they pivoted and looked at Coffee Prince instead. And so that's how that happened. Lee Sun-mi was a published novelist, but she hadn't written any dramas before. She hadn't written for the screen before. And there's no way any broadcaster is going to give a rookie screenwriter such a big project. And so an interesting fact is there was actually a secondary writer as well, a secondary script writer. She was also a rookie. And so you had two rookie screenwriters. So in order to make this project move forward, the broadcaster basically attached a veteran writer to be sort of like a secret advisor. This writer was not announced anywhere and it wasn't publicized. It was really just meant to make sure that the drama stayed on track and didn't go off the rails. And that writer was No Hee-kyung, who is a hugely respected, major veteran writer. Her work is not just respected, but she's almost known as more of like a literary writer. Some of her earlier hits include More Beautiful Than a Flower, Goodbye Solo. She did Worlds Within, That Winter the Wind Blows, Dear My Friends, It's Okay It's Love, and Our Blues. Side note, No Hee-kyung and the director Eun-hye are actually repairing for an upcoming Netflix drama called Tantara, and that means entertainer in sort of like a derogatory way, like a little bit of an insulting way. And that also stars Kong-yu, who of course is in Coffee Prince, and with Song Hye-kyo. And Song Hye-kyo was in No Hee-kyung's earlier drama Worlds Within. So we're all one big happy family. Anyway, when you look back at this writer and director combo, I think you can see why Coffee Prince had this elevated feeling that it did. I'm not sure if you're watching it now, if that comes across, but at the time it felt really fresh and different. Trendy dramas had a very glossy, stylized feel. I mean, they still do, right? So they have that like studio gloss to them. And they're very fun and pop colors and lots of quick cuts and pop music needle drops. Coffee Prince didn't feel like that. It felt much more like an indie movie. It felt like very breezy and free-flowing, almost improvised, which, by the way, is that director's directing style. Like, she likes to improvise and go with the flow of the scene. And you really feel that come across because Coffee Prince has such a naturalistic vibe to it that you really don't see in a lot of rom-coms. Maybe you do now, but she almost created like a subcategory of indie romance drama that maybe we saw in movies, but we weren't really seeing in K-dramas. And a huge credit, I think, has to go to the music. And the music was also one of the highlights of the drama that really stood out, and people definitely took notice at the time. I think if you watch a lot of K-dramas, you probably noticed that there's a few key soundtrack songs that get played over and over and over. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with that because I do actually really like the songs, and so when you hear them come back, it's an instant shortcut. Your mind goes immediately to the emotional state that you're supposed to be in. Some drama songs transport you immediately, and it's a lovely thing. We probably can, think of a bunch of them off the top of our heads. But at the same time, I think after a certain point, it tends to lose its punch after a while when it's been overused. But with this soundtrack, you had music used throughout the show in really subtle ways. Even things like Yuju's cell phone ringtone was an indie music song. Just little moments peppered throughout. The music was played really to set the mood and less about pushing a certain song. So a lot of the music came from this indie label called Pastel Music. Pastel Music went on to become really the major label for indie bands in Korea. And this was at a time in the mid-aughts, right? In the mid-2000s when indie music was really starting to grow and get a foothold. One key bit of connective tissue here is that the music director of Coffee Prince was Tearliner, aka Park Sung-hoon, who first worked with this director, Eun-hye, with Daereung National Village, and then followed her a couple more times on future projects such as Heart to Heart and Cheese in the Trap. And he also was a part of the project band Low End Project, which is also featured on the Coffee Prince soundtrack. So, while indie music had been growing in the background, what Coffee Prince really did was open up this world to an international audience. And because of the high-profile nature of Coffee Prince, many, many more people became aware of it than if they had been left to their own devices. You had bands like Humming Urban Stereo, Casker, Yozo, Taru, Instant Romantic Floor, Misty Blue, Tearliner. And it's not just the music scene. I think music scene is just one indication of what's going on a larger scale too. If you take a look at the popularity and prevalence of Gangnam as sort of a cultural idea and a set of trends and a location. Gangnam meaning south of the river, or the Han River in Seoul, which like cuts through at the midpoint of Seoul. And the counterpart to Gangnam is Gangbuk, which is north of the river. Okay, so short history lesson. Gangbuk, or north of the river, that's where you had the city center and the city halls. In the 70s is where you see this boom start to happen south of the river, where people are starting to take advantage of the cheap land and building it up and turning it into a new hotbed of activity with high-rises and new buildings and new businesses, and kind of having a revitalization of this area. So Gangnam becomes really hip and trendy, and it's known a little bit more for its upscale, bougie sort of aesthetic, very gentrified. Whereas north of the river is still a huge part of the city. It definitely didn't go down in prominence, but the overall aesthetic of Gangnam just started to become more prevalent. And I think if we're looking at drama history, that's where you see a lot of the trendy stories being set. Coffee Prince, meanwhile, is set north of the river, and you'll hear the word Hongdae a lot. Hongdae meaning like the Hongik University area. It's known for kind of having like an artsy vibe, live clubs, live music, being a little bit more creative and artsy, whereas Gangnam is more, it's trendy, it's hip, it's new. So Hongdae is basically like a counter argument for Gangnam, and Coffee Prince being set in this area, featuring this kind of aesthetic and this non K-pop music. K-pop, of course, being very popular at the time, indie music kind of rising. Indie music never overtook or never tried to overtake K-pop. It's really more that it was being presented as an alternative style, and some people found it and discovered, hey, I like this style that isn't the mainstream, and ironically kind of made this alternate style into the mainstream as well, which is an interesting position to be in. In any case, I think this drama just really came at this perfect time to present this alternate story of K-drama, of aesthetic, of music, of fashion, and also of storytelling. In particular, its empathetic, nuanced, and narratively bold depiction of the themes of gender identity, masculinity, femininity, and queer conflict. As a result of this drama, I'd say that it opened the door for future dramas to also tell more stories featuring queer characters and storylines with greater depth and insight than they would have otherwise. We did, of course, have plenty of the farcical, gender-bending, cross-dressing kind of dramas. Those will always be in existence, and hey, some of them are really fun. But as a result, we were also able to see stories like Seonggyun Scandal. That's the one where Park Min-young dresses as a male because she wants to go to university, and so she has to dress as a man to become a scholar. And then there's also Painter of the Wind, which was a reverse scenario where Moon Gun-young, she plays an artist who is a woman who has to disguise herself as male to be able to pursue her career as an artist. And there, the love interest is actually a woman, Moon Chae-won, who thinks that Moon Gun-young is a male when she's actually a woman in disguise. That one was also a very well done artistic take. Nowadays, we're in the midst of this whole BL drama boom, so maybe it's hard to imagine a world without these dramas. But I think Coffee Prince is kind of an early precursor to that because, again, it's not a true male-male love story, but it tackles issues of identity, self-doubt, uh, gender politics, and even homophobia. And we're able to see more nuanced storytelling now as a result. Semantic Error is a really good example of a BL drama that one was really well done and was a full-length drama as well, and really explored the relationship growth between these two characters who start out at odds. It's like kind of like a rocky, like it's not quite enemies to lovers, but it is they start out at odds and then become friends and then become lovers. And even in something like Nevertheless, which is not primarily a queer love story, you had that lesbian side couple. What I really loved about that storytelling was it was told in a very natural way. Like they didn't make a huge issue out of the fact that these were two girls. Maybe it was a sign of the times that we didn't need to make a big issue out of it. It was just two young people trying to figure out if they liked each other or not. And their genders were just one part of the equation. I think it was much more like, does my friend like me or not? So as an early example of these kinds of stories, I think Coffee Prince did a really good job of setting the stage and paving the way for more to come. Okay, post Coffee Prince. Just as Eun-hye and Kong-yu came into Coffee Prince kind of at different points, they also exited at different points. Like Kong-yu, we all know Kong-yu, right? Like you wouldn't have clicked into this video if you didn't know who Kong-yu was. And he's a massive, massive star now. And I think Coffee Prince was really the start of that trajectory. He was popular before, but Coffee Prince is the kind of pedigree that really takes you to the next level. Actually, after Coffee Prince and after he did his military service, he went a lot more into movies, which you sometimes you see drama actors like disappear into movies after a while, but which I miss because it's the dramas that make them really accessible. But he came back in big fashion with Goblin, which is probably what we all know him from. And I don't know if we would have gotten Goblin if he hadn't done Coffee Prince first. Kong-yu said in the Coffee Prince reunion, which I think was like in 2020, that he's not sure what his career would have looked like without Coffee Prince. Like it set him in that direction. Eun-hye had a different trajectory out. I don't know that it's sad, but it's just she could never really reach that height again, which of course we didn't know that at the time. At the time we thought that, this was just the start and she was going to go off and become a megastar, even more of one. And she did have some modest successes after that. Some were truly disappointments, but she did okay for a little while, but was just never able to find a project that would be on par with Coffee Prince. Although you could argue that's a once in a lifetime opportunity, so maybe it's not realistic to think that that could happen again. She said in an interview afterward, and I think that's maybe tinged with a little bit of bittersweetness, is that some people have like years of being unknown and then they start to get success, and so their biggest successes come later. She, on the other hand, had all of her biggest successes early. She had Baby Vox and then Princess Hours and then Coffee Prince and a few others that like The Vineyard Man and Missing You that were okay. After that, she wasn't able to recapture that magic, which I think maybe it's a little sad, but maybe that's also life. If you look at her more current interviews, I think she's made peace with that a little bit, but at the time, I'm sure it was hard. Side note, which I won't get into too much, it's not that she's entirely at the whims of fate. She did have some controversies. I think they were, in retrospect, I do think she was treated harshly and maybe more harshly than she deserved. But at the time, in 2015, at the time she was on a reality competition show, kind of like Project Runway in China, and she was accused of plagiarism for some of the designs. Basically, there was a designer from a smaller brand that said that she had ripped off their designs, and she was winning on this show, and it came out that there were a couple of designs that she was accused of having ripped off. And she always said that she had studied designs and looked at other designers, but all of the ideas were her own. They are very similar looking designs. The TLDR there is that her apology was maybe not done so well. Like she wrote some stuff on social media that was a little flippant and people really soured on her. It didn't cancel her. It just meant that she had a few years of not really being in the public eye before she was ready to come back for a project. And those projects were just not on the scale of the dramas that she was doing before. One last bit of legacy for Coffee Prince is honestly coffee. Coffee has had a massive boom in Korea in the past decade. So basically, like 20 years ago, coffee was not really a big deal in Korea. It was a lot of mixed coffee and it wasn't a big culture. Somewhere in the last 15 years, it has really turned into this mega business. And now, for instance, if you look just at Starbucks, Korea is now their third biggest global market, which is kind of crazy if you think of how small Korea is. Starbucks entered Korea in 1999, and at the time of Coffee Prince in 2007, they had, I think, 200 stores open. And in 2026, now they have over 2,000. Did Coffee Prince cause Starbucks to boom? No, I'm not saying that. But it mirrors. I think you can take a look at where it was and see that it was an inflection point. This is the moment where this drama that showcased this artisanal coffee culture, this new burgeoning music scene, and this area, north of the river that was coming back into vogue again. It came right at the moment where all of those things were on the rise. And so when you look back, it looks like that was where it started. It was maybe just really prescient at capturing those things before they turned into trends. All right, so we've worked our way through Coffee Prince. I probably forgot things that I was meaning to talk about, but whatever, it's fine. It is what it is. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.